The trade deadline is less than a week away. What might the Pacers be up to? What are the biggest topics concerning their upcoming week? Michael Scotto, NBA Insider for HoopsHype, joins us to talk centers, Bennedict Mathurin, the league at large, other little things like Keon Ellis and being a facilitator, and so much more on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it through the weekend. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin In. Today, it is the Friday before the trade deadline, and it is almost here. Less than a week until the pencil's down, the final buzzer sounds, and there's still so much to talk about with the Pacers. Their center outlook, will they trade for that player now, or the advantages to doing so later? Bennedict Mathurin's expiring contract, what are the considerations with him? Do teams have interest? What is his value? What should the Pacers want to do with him? Their distance from the luxury tax line, could they be facilitators and actually take in a player and get a little asset for doing so? They have rumored interest in Keon Ellis. What is that about? Do they have the scratch to actually do it? Should they want to do it? And so much more. And NBA Insider for HoopsHype, Michael Scotto, joins us today to break all that down. We cover every angle of all of those key topics and start a little bit at the beginning, because every conversation he's been having is about the Bucks and Giannis, talking about how that will impact or change or potentially slow the trade market this year and what it could mean for the rest of the teams. Will it have a significant impact on the Pacers business? We'll see, but every team is going to be keeping their eyes on that, and that is where we start. Really fun conversation. Love talking with Scotto. He is the best. Please support all of his work. Let's just get right to it. The best in the biz, Michael Scotto, NBA Insider for HoopsHype, is here. The trade deadline is a week / less than a week away, depending on when you're listening. The Pacers actually kind of have a lot they need to consider, and yet nothing they need to do, which is a very, very interesting spot. Mr. Scotto, hello. Love hearing your voice and your Brooklyn accent. How are you holding up this time of year?
Hey, Tony, all good. You know, I'm shoveling as much snow as I am digging on trade rumors here in Brooklyn, but all good, brother. How about yourself?
Digging more snow or trade rumors? I've been shoveling like crazy.
Definitely more snow lately. We had like almost 10 inches the other day of snow, and now that the Giannis talk has kind of picked up again a little bit more earnestly, it's moving the needle in terms of him. But the rest of the league now, anybody else that was like a trade candidate, whether it's Anthony Davis, Ja Morant, cool beans, bro. Take a seat.
How much do you expect that to hold up everything else? Because I keep reading about, and just common sense of NBA front office order of operations would be that something like that, until a decision is made, not for every team, but for some, would hold up their business doing anything else. Yeah,
look, the big picture, if you were a team that's in the Giannis sweepstakes in any way, you're holding everything, whether that's, you know, the Knicks, Miami, Golden State, Minnesota. You're not really – I mean, Minnesota's been linked to some point guards as well, but big picture right now, it's like all the focus has to be on Giannis, and you don't want to do anything that's going to hurt your chances of getting him if that's a real opportunity. You know, with Anthony Davis, a lot of the trade talk kind of quieted after he got hurt with his hand. But that said, it wasn't a robust market before that, quite frankly. And for Dallas, it was, well, you can keep him, you know, see if he can play with Kyrie Irving and Cooper Flag at some point. You don't have to make a move now. You know, with Ja Morant, same thing. It's like, unless they're going to get at least a first-round pick, I don't know if you need to move him like this very second. He's been out anyway with injuries, so it's not like it's hurting their potential lottery position. And even with the Bucks, real quick, like people say to me, well, you know, if they trade Giannis, it could help the lottery odds. Well, he's out for a while anyway, and they haven't been that great with him anyway or without him. So what are we talking about? It's more about when are you going to get the best deal if you're going to move Giannis ultimately. And for a lot of teams, they're going to have more picks available over the summer. And from that perspective purely, on paper, it's more advantageous for Milwaukee to potentially move Giannis in the summer when teams like the Miami Heat have more picks.
I'd be very curious if the Pacers have much overlap with teams interested in Giannis right now, just because of their situation and what they're looking at, because they, by reports and by chatting with people, are more interested in getting a center themselves, which is sort of a separate thing. Ben Mathurin's come up all the time, and their situation, to zoom out before we get into any specific thing, is just really fascinating to me in general in this new CBA 8-bird environment. They made the finals last year. They were half a game away from a title, and now they are currently, as we're talking, the 4th worst record in the league, but were the worst 2 days ago. Now, that's a very rare combo of you're good, you're going to be good next year, but you stink right now. So intuition, when you look at their record, is sell off parts, but they shouldn't do that. But going and buying something awesome right now is also kind of weird because they're bad. What do you make of that situation and kind of the competing forces pushing on that team?
Look, if you're Indiana, I think first and foremost, you kind of got to start figuring out what are you going to do with Ben Mathurin, who's eligible for restricted free agency. What are you willing to pay him? Gauge the market and see what his value is. And in terms of the center position for Indiana, they've canvassed the market all across the league. The question is, where do these guys fall in a ranking and an order? For example, like a guy like Daniel Gafford, where does he fall in that? Yves Missy, same thing. There's a lot of other centers out there as well, and there's some fallback options. If they have to wait until free agency, I could see a world where even like Nikola Vucevic is a guy that they would look at depending on what happens with him. So, again, more of a fallback option. But I'm saying, the spectrum of centers for Indiana is so wide right now. And if you're going to acquire somebody, you don't necessarily want to acquire somebody that's going to make you that much better that it tips the scales of where you're at in the lottery standings. You're more looking at, okay, do we get a guy that could fit with Tyrese Haliburton next year? And it's better to do it now and lock a guy in. And they've been in talks and other guys as well. Like Keon Ellis with the Sacramento Kings has come up as well. It's been a guy they've liked for years. So there's an opportunity where you can get him now. And if you get him, teams can assign him to an extension after the deadline. Sacramento can as well if they elect to keep him. So those are just things out there that are worth monitoring with Indiana. A lot, like you said, they can do, but they don't have to do. But they'll be in the mix on a lot of stuff, which is intriguing.
Yeah, what you said about Vooch is certainly interesting to me for their center spot, in that there's certainly good players they could trade for. A million names have been reported at various times: Okongwu, Zubac, Gafford, some young guys who may or may not even be available, Yves Missy recently, and all that. And those are all fine players. Missy may not be starter level, but beyond the specifics of the quality of players they could trade for, if they think or know, hey, in the summer with our mid-level, we could get Vucevic or Nurkic or someone like that on their team, like how much does that change how much they're willing to trade now? And then to your point, is that actually worth it for them to do right this second when winning shouldn't be their priority for you have something to say?
Well, no, I was going to say, you also, in talking, as we're talking this out loud, it also jogs me to think, well, in theory, depending also where the market shapes with Ben Mathurin, can you do a sign and trade and get a center back? There's a million different combinations and possibilities that they could do. So they've got to be, they've fully been doing their due diligence. I know that. Talking whether it's them and people around the league. So they'll be in position to make the best move. No stone will be unturned. But again, I don't think they have to do anything now. But if it's advantageous for them, they certainly have the flexibility to do so. And, we'll see what they do also with some of their stars as well. Like, Tyrese isn't coming back, but with Pascal Siakam going into the second half of the year, do you maybe taper back his minutes a little bit? Try to see what you got in some of these younger guys, more like Jarvis Walker, etc. There's a lot of questions that that Indiana should be. You've
been talking about the Bucks a lot recently, Scotto.
Yeah, Milwaukee's been every other sentence on my mind when it comes to the trade market. So forgive me, but yes.
Everybody, quick break so we can talk about Gametime. There is nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part has not always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast, without the hassle, puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. You can pull up the Gametime app. You can pick an upcoming NBA game. Pacers on a little homestand right now. You can have tickets locked in within minutes. You can see the all-in-one price up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout like other places. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, which makes your decision even easier. They have zone deals, which will stand out. You just pick the section you want to sit in. They'll pick the seats, and you save. Great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. Everything feels quick and intuitive and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today, and remember, it's gametime.co or .co, not .com. Yeah, it's all fascinating to me, right? And like it could be a player they believe is available now and might not be in the summer, or the opposite, they're not available now. And you know how it is. The playoffs change every team's perspective ever so slightly. And there's also, I mean, you know this better than anybody, like a lot of times transaction cycles are a precursor for the next one. Like you sniff around, see what's there. Maybe you don't do it now, and then you do. Like they were interested in Siakam the summer before. They'd actually traded for him at the deadline, for example. Like you set up and see what's out there, so maybe they don't do anything now, but they know the price points for these guys, or they make a connection point with a center that's available. That's all just as important, even if they don't actually make a trade.
Those combos definitely picked up with Siakam. I remember at the G League Showcase. Like that was a time where that kind of moved the needle.
I got poked about it at Summer League that year, and, everybody knew Toronto was going to change directions, but who knew when and how, and then they didn't do it till January 14th or 15th, whatever it was, right? That's often how it is, right? That's why Nick Richards I keep thinking about, because he got connected to the Pacers a lot last cycle. The Suns could get under the tax. The Pacers could just we'll see. That's just a name that I think about. So center is certainly something that will matter for them, but I think they have to know that it can't be a half measure. If it's not a starting level player, it's just not worth it for them to do it. They need a starting level center when Haliburton is playing again next season, ready to go. If they don't have that, what are they doing? They can compete. They made the finals last year. They are currently the reigning Eastern Conference champions. Anything short of a starting caliber center is just not worth it to them, unless it's not the move and it's just a move. So center is, I don't know about you, but when people ask me about the Pacers or are curious what they might be doing or just talking to me about them, that is by far the majority of what people have asked me about, is what they're going to do at the spot, or what I think they're going to do, or what they've heard, or whatever, things of that nature. But by far the second most common thing I get asked about is Bennedict Mathurin, and that's very natural because of their players of consequence and really of their whole team. Michael Potter has a team option. Cam Jones is half guaranteed, whatever. Of their standard contracts, he is the only expiring contract, and that is just a natural point that people go to when a team isn't good, and the Pacers should be good next year. Mathurin just scored 27 points in a finals game 7 months ago, but he's expiring, and the Pacers' salary structure is that they'd probably have to be a pretty expensive team if they want to keep him, and maybe they do. He's really good. His ceiling is pretty high, but people ask a lot about if they're going to keep him, what his role could be, what his value actually is. What do you think the situation is with him and how the Pacers might handle that?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this. When it comes to Ben, first of all, you're going to be looking at a guy that's probably going to try to get in the 20s per year, I would imagine, for a salary. Certainly think he's worth more, especially given his age, than a full mid-level. So, I'm looking somewhere in the 20s. I don't know where. I think that depends on the market. And then also, there are teams out there that have called and checked in on him and are looking to get younger. And I think he would be an intriguing option for a lot of these teams, like you touched on, a guy that can get you 20 a night. Love the dog. The dog?
This is Manny. Manny says hello.
Yeah. I couldn't see for a sec. Sorry, I don't have my contacts in. But big picture. I just saw, again, this is how my vision is without my contacts. I just saw a huge thing of fur, and it looked like so wide. I was like, oh, maybe that's like a dog coming through.
Manny, he called you wide.
Again, because my vision, it's like, everything looks bigger. But big picture, like also getting back to Ben, and even if they decide to keep him, right, going into next season and beyond, okay, then usually with the Pacers, you would think that there'd be a subsequent move by the deadline or something after. Do they then flip him later? Do they do a sign and trade? Do they flip him later or somebody else? Obviously, the luxury tax is always something that's been a barometer for them. I know they said, well, with Miles Turner, they would have went over it. Okay, you might have went into the season starting it, but would you have stayed there?
Yeah.
I'd have believed it when I saw it. But ultimately, those are the type of things that matter for Indiana right now and for Ben. I think either way, like he's in a good position going into restricted free agency, and he's still young, man. Usually guys like that get paid on upside and what they're going to be, and he's already shown, like you said, on the finals, this guy can get you buckets and be a proven scorer. So we'll see with Ben, but he's going to be in a good spot either way.
We've seen with the Pacers, they always consider early expiring contracts, right? The first year they made the conference finals, I bring this up all the time, they traded away Buddy Hield that year, right? And Buddy Hield was a rotation contributor for them, and they still thought big picture and traded him for Doug McDermott and a second-round pick because they thought about and McDermott was expiring too, but they got value out of that situation, and Buddy wanted to be somewhere else, but they thought ahead with things like that, right? I think with Mathurin, obviously restricted free agency means they could keep him, but people around the league, when I am asked about him, just wonder so much about what his value actually is, like what his contract should be, because his ceiling and games like we're talking about in the finals are so high, but these scoring two guards are just such a question mark in terms of their value when sometimes they add a lot of other stuff. Mathurin's rebounding is very strong for somebody of his position, but then there's some games where you don't feel him as much, and if the shots or the scoring isn't there, you just he's a little less visible. People just have wondered to me what that value actually is, both for a contract perspective and from a trade perspective. And I mean, you know how this is, but the history of guys in his position in the last year of their rookie deal right before free agency getting moved, they don't typically fetch like a ton. Like they're about to be paid more fairly, and they're heading into free agency. It's just not typically like a super high price point. So there are certainly teams that would be interested in him for all the reasons you said. He's young, he's talented, his ceiling might be very high. But I've had a lot of trouble, and so have people I've talked to about it, pinning down what his value actually is. So is it going to be that he's moved because they don't know what his value is and they'd rather use that value elsewhere, or is it that he's moved for their center? I think those are two different questions the Pacers are considering.
Yeah, look, when it comes to Ben, I mean, if you can get a starting caliber center for him, I think you certainly have to look at it.
Agreed.
If you're Indiana. I'm not saying you have to do it, but you have to look at it, depending on who the player is. Again, they've been linked to guys like Dan Gafford. Is he a guy that they consider as a starter? Yves Missy. You have to ask these questions. There's a lot of other centers as well out there. But big picture, I kind of touched on it with you a little bit earlier, but I'll reiterate it. I think Ben's a guy that's going to be, I don't know where in the 20s, but I would imagine he's going to get paid around there.
I agree.
So I don't know if it's low 20s, mid 20s, high 20s. I don't know yet. It's too early. I'm just being honest. And anybody that tells you they do is lying to your face.
Agreed.
So to me, that's kind of the barometer for Ben right now. And again, if you can get a center for him that's going to start, given the depth that they have, maybe it makes sense. Can they also maybe separately acquire a guy like a Keon Ellis, pay him a little less, but you give up some, draft compensation for him, something like that? Could be, maybe. We'll see. There's a lot of different conversations out there right now. And as we're recording this going into the weekend ahead of the trade deadline, it's really going to ramp up then in the start of next week.
I would like to get into Keon in just a minute, but to wrap up on Ben, last year I did the exercise after Cam Thomas went through his free agency, guys who make 20 plus or score 20 points a game or more usually get paid a lot. And people thought Mathurin might reach that height this year just because he had a bigger role. And he's been hurt so much that he hasn't been able to, but he's close, right? If you score that much, someone will be interested in paying you a good amount of money. And Kuminga, even with all his fit questions, which Mathurin has, got, mid 20s millions per year. Giddey, similar restricted free agent with some questions, got mid 20s. So I certainly think he'll be looking for in that 20 million range. And the Pacers are about that much from the tax without their high paid first round pick or their center, right? So they certainly just have a lot of financial juggling to do. You've reported a lot about this, I think 2 different times. One about potential Pacers interest, and then again that someone mentioned Jarris Walker was in talks. That was before Jarris Walker exploded onto the scene in the last month or so with very, very strong play for a sustained amount of time. But Keon Ellis and the Pacers, what have you said about that? One more break here, everybody. We got to talk about FanDuel. It is the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday. One last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60 coming up, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with special offers just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels even bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make sure the Super Bowl is even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer on FanDuel, just bet $5. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if you win that bet. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the NFL season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Well, first off, to your point, yeah, when Jarvis Walker was struggling, that was definitely where that kind of came in, and some talks with Keon Ellis. In terms of Jarvis, the trade talk around him has subsided. You mentioned about his play recently and him kind of coming into his own a little more. In terms of Keon Ellis, I mean, look, half the league is called on Keon Ellis, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not like, he's a good 3-and-D player. He's being underutilized in Sacramento. Well,
Scotto, they have 12 wins. How could they possibly play him?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but big picture, every coach has their cup of tea. But with Keon, I would say that people know what he is. He's a 3-and-D guy. He's a good role player. I think the question just with him becomes: is he a $10 million a year guy? Is he a full mid-level guy, somewhere in that range? That's kind of what you got to figure out, I think. In terms of compensation, look, Sacramento has loved ideally to get a first-round pick for him as a standalone value. However, they've also talked about including him with DeMar DeRozan to try to get off of his money looking ahead and kind of spur a rebuild a little bit. And so there's other conversations there. Is there multiple second-round pick compensation on the table for him right now? Yeah. But I don't think that you can wait on that and see. But you have that as a floor, or you keep him, like I said, and you can extend him after the trade deadline when he is eligible to do so.
To the extent that I know anyone worth anything, he's been described as one of the players most likely to be traded this year, Keon Ellis, because of that interest that you just described. And certainly I get why the Pacers would want him. He's a good player. He fits the way they play. He can shoot and defend. Earlier in the season, when they didn't have point guards, it would have made a lot of sense when they were really hurt. And, of course, they could use more depth at the position behind Haliburton. But they just have so many guys on the perimeter between Shepherd, even if Mathurin's back, who knows, Walker, McConnell, Nembhard, Haliburton, Nesmith, whoever they draft even potentially, that, like, Ellis would be good for them. If they get him, I would totally get it. But I wonder what they think his role would be next season and how that would influence what they'd be willing to send out, even if, again, I totally get why they'd be interested. He's a good fit. He's a good player. But if there's so much interest that it drives the price up to something like you're describing, I think they might just say, maybe not quite the time for that. But they certainly, I think, a very small subplot, because he's playing still well this year, is TJ McConnell turns 35 pretty soon. Like, he isn't going to be awesome forever, right? They do have to think about an off-ramp when it comes to some of their reserve guards. So
do they? I thought Kevin Pritchard publicly shot that down a little bit.
I don't think they'll trade McConnell. I think they need to figure out the piece that will come in to eventually take some of that role.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, like, TJ McConnell is, like, beloved in Indiana.
Yeah. I don't think they'll ever trade him. And quite frankly, like, I've learned a lot about the value of, and you were plugged in with the Pacers early last season. I've learned a lot about the value of a great locker room with this team. Like, disrupting that would be very painful for this.
No, it matters across the league. I mean, everybody loves TJ, like teammates, coaches. Like, that's a guy you want in your locker room. He's still productive. He's a really good backup point guard. One of the best in the league. He's on a good contract. You're good.
Yeah. The only other, maybe not big, but question I would have about them for you is they're $5.5 million right now shy of the tax. They have their full mid-level. They have this Haliburton disabled player exception. I kind of think they're being understated as a team that could be a facilitator, not with like any significant salary moves, but a smaller thing. Have you heard anything of that nature? They did that, for example, a few years ago, and they took in Jordan Nwora from the Bucks in that big Jay Crowder trade. They got Kyra Lewis doing something similar to the Pelicans. Have you heard anything of that nature with them?
I mean, not as much as other teams that have more cap space. Obviously, the leader of that pack is the Brooklyn Nets with their $15+ million cap space. Atlanta's in that game a little bit. There are other teams as well. But, yeah, it makes sense because, look, at the end of the day, if you're a team like Denver, if you're a team like Phoenix and you're just over
Toronto,
Yeah, well, Toronto's need a little bit more. They'd have to get off Ochai
Agbaji, yeah.
But big picture, like if you're like just over the tax and you got to get rid of like a minimum guy or something, that could make sense.
Yeah, if you could get Hunter Tyson and a second, or
Look at you. Very smart. Very good.
Nick Richards in a second, or Chai, like we said, or Garrett Temple. I don't know if they trade Garrett Temple. They love him. But something like that does make sense to me as a way for the Pacers to kind of just like know their team is good. They don't need to move anything, but they could extract a draft asset that way using their distance. And the day we're recording this, Tony Bradley's 10-day expired last night, and they don't plan to bring him back right now. I presume that is because, for the obvious reason, they have a roster spot open and they have more financial flexibility for the exact reason we're talking about, just to have that as a possibility, or to just have more wiggle room to take in a little bit more than you send out in some of these bigger trades that we've discussed. That certainly matters to them. So I wonder what their level of interest. It sounds weird to say facilitator because $5.5 million is not that much, but all these deals with apron teams, like they're all so close that could matter in a way that is helpful for them. So I'd be very curious if they have any, and they've shown in the past they are, in willingness to do that in a year like this.
Confusing. Yeah, no, absolutely. You might as well. And then you take that, if you get draft compensation, okay, next year when hopefully you're back to form with Tyrese Haliburton fully healthy, Siakam comes back, okay, time to roll.
Have I missed anything on the Pacers front to you, Michael Scotto?
Nah, we'll talk about who they could draft closer to. I get a lot of kick out of that, and who people think they should get now before the lottery has even happened. I think in general, like you covered it as usually very well.
There's always people asking me who they should draft. I'm like, man, they're barely halfway through their season. Can they finish their games first before I have to?
You're gonna have to do a mock draft and get everybody ready to roll.
Well, I think BYU and Kansas play each other pretty soon, which will only increase the volume of those questions that's headed my way. Scotto, you're the best. Really appreciate the time. You are the busiest man on the planet this and next week. So anytime, I really, really appreciate. I love the things you do. You cover like so many insiders cover lots of stuff. Don't get me wrong, but you have by far the most detailed and wide-ranging notebooks to me, which I love and appreciate. Where can people find those things and the many things you do covering the NBA?
My man, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. It's on HoopsHype.com. Most of all, Twitter at Mike A. Scotto, Scotto.
I have typed that at many times to say Mike A. Scotto first, or something to that effect on the transaction front. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow talking Pacers Hawks, one of their last couple of games before said trade deadline next week. And then All-Stars will be named Sunday. Is Siakam going to be there? We'll talk about that and so much more. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you very soon.